The faint hum of static filled the cramped control room of the Vanguard 7 Deep Space Observatory, hidden beneath a Siberian mountain range. For years, it had been little more than a forgotten relic, monitoring the heavens for signals humanity no longer expected to hear. But tonight, amid the snowy silence, a strange pulse broke the monotony. Dr. Amara Voss leaned over the console, her sharp green eyes narrowing behind cracked glasses. The rhythmic pattern of the pulse tugged at her instincts, mathematical precision masked within the noise. She adjusted the frequency filters with deliberate movements, her fingers tapping out a staccato rhythm of determination. "What's the verdict, Doc?" asked Danny Ortega, the station's technician and self-proclaimed skeptic. His voice was laced with fatigue and the boredom of years spent chasing ghosts. Amara didn't respond immediately. The signal sequence had her transfixed. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, a pattern embedded in chaos. "Danny, pull up the spectrograph." Danny groaned but complied, his chair squeaking as he swiveled toward the adjacent monitor. "It's probably just solar interference, or one of those corporate satellites glitching out again." But the spectrograph said otherwise. A tight, repeating pulse emerged on the screen, defying the erratic signature of natural phenomena. Amara leaned closer, her heart pounding. "This isn't interference," she muttered. Danny squinted at the screen, his skepticism crumbling. "So, what are we looking at?" "It's a transmission," Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And it's not human." Danny froze. "You're kidding, right?" Amara ignored him, already scribbling equations and annotations into her battered notebook. The signal's structure reminded her of something. An old, half-forgotten paper on prime number encoding. The kind of thing no one had cared about since humanity turned its gaze inward, abandoning the stars for the safety of Earth. "Help me isolate the source," she said, her voice snapping with authority. Danny hesitated. "This could be classified. I mean, if this is real." "If this is real," Amara interrupted. "We don't have time to debate protocols. Start triangulating." The minutes stretched into hours as they worked, the room growing colder as the night deepened. By the time they isolated the signal's origin, Danny was visibly pale. Doc, this thing isn't coming from space." Amara's pen hovered over her notebook. "What are you talking about?" It's local. Like Earth local." Danny tapped the monitor, his voice unsteady. "Coordinates trace back to the Pacific Ocean, just off the coast of Easter Island." Before Amara could respond, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. A deep hum resonated through the observatory, rattling the walls. "What the hell was that?" Danny whispered, his voice trembling. Amara's gaze darted back to the screen, now glowing faintly with residual energy. Her stomach tightened. The pulse had changed. Its rhythm had quickened, as if responding to their discovery. "This isn't just a signal," she said, her voice hollow. "It's waking something up." The storm over the Pacific raged with a ferocity that defied weather models. Towering waves battered the aging research vessel, the Mariner's Resolve, as its engines strained against the current. Below deck, Dr. Amara Voss huddled in a dimly lit cabin, her eyes fixed on the glowing coordinates on her laptop. The signal's source was a point just 3 kilometers beneath the ocean surface, near an uncharted trench east of Easter Island. "Hey, Doc, you okay?" Danny Ortega poked his head through the doorway, his usual sarcastic tone muted by concern. Amara didn't look up. "This is bigger than anything I've worked on before," she said, her voice a mix of awe and dread. "The structure of the signal, it's like a multi-layered key. Each layer unlocks a deeper truth. And this," she tapped the screen, "this is the final lock." Danny stepped inside, leaning against the bulkhead as the ship groaned under the weight of another wave. "What kind of truth are we talking about here? Little green men? Space whales? Because if it's killer robots, I'm out." "It's a warning," Amara said, turning to face him. "The fragments I've decoded so far describe a cataclysm, a predator that consumes civilizations, The ones who sent the signal weren't warning us. They were warning themselves. Before Danny could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Dr. Voss, we've reached the site," Captain Hayes announced. "You might want to come topside for this." Amara grabbed her jacket, her stomach twisting. The deck was slick with rain and seawater as she emerged into the chaos. The storm had intensified, but through the rain and mist, she could see the glowing outline of something massive beneath the waves. "What is that?" she whispered, stepping closer to the railing. Captain Hayes stood beside her, his weathered face etched with concern. "Sonar picked it up an hour ago. Metallic, hundreds of meters wide. It's like nothing we've ever seen." Amara's heart raced. "That's it. That's where the signal's coming from." Danny joined them, squinting into the distance. Guys, is it just me, or is that thing moving?" The glow intensified, spreading across the surface like veins of molten light. The ship's instruments went haywire, alarms blaring as the water around them began to churn. "Brace yourselves," Hayes shouted, gripping the railing as a column of water erupted skyward. From the depth, a monolithic structure emerged, its surface etched with intricate patterns that pulsed in sync with the signal. It was ancient, scared by time and pressure, yet alive with an eerie, otherworldly energy. Amara staggered back, her mind racing. This wasn't just a discovery. This was proof. Proof that humanity's history was far older and stranger than anyone had imagined. Before she could process it, a low, guttural hum resonated from the structure. The sound vibrated through her chest, drowning out the storm. "It's transmitting again," she murmured, clutching her laptop. Danny's voice was barely audible over the noise. "Yeah, but if it's waking up, what else is out there that might hear it?" Amara didn't answer. Her focus was on the screen, where the signal was changing, shifting. A new pattern emerged, more urgent, more frantic. It wasn't just a warning. It was a call for help. The submersible abyssal horizon creaked under the crushing weight of the ocean as it descended into the trench. Inside, the small cabin was dimly lit by the soft blue glow of instrument panels. Amara Voss sat in the cramped cockpit, staring intently at the live feed on the monitor. The ancient structure loomed below, its geometric edges too perfect to be natural. Intricate patterns of glowing lines pulsed across its surface, as though alive. Danny Ortega, crammed into the seat beside her, tapped nervously on the console. "I'm just gonna say it. This feels like the part in every movie where things go south. Really south." "Focus, Danny," Amara said, her voice tight. She wasn't in the mood for banter. The closer they got to the structure, the louder the signal became in her headset, a layered rhythm of tones that felt like it was burrowing into her skull. "Approaching the anomaly," said Jiro Tanaka, their pilot, as he adjusted the sub's controls with practiced precision. "We're at 7,000 meters and closing. External pressure stable, for now." The feed flickered as the structure came into full view. It was massive, easily the size of a small city, with spires and arches that defied conventional architecture. Glyphs carved into its surface seemed to ripple like liquid, glowing brighter as the sub approached. "What am I looking at?" Jiro muttered, his eyes wide. "Evidence," Amara said. "This predates human civilization. It could even predate humanity itself." She leaned closer to the monitor, her mind racing. If the signal came from here, then whoever, or whatever, built this was trying to leave a message for us. "Or a trap," Danny said, his voice laced with unease. Before Amara could respond, the sub jolted violently. Warning alarms blared as the lights flickered. "What was that?" Danny shouted, gripping his seat. "Something's interfering with the subsystems," Jiro yelled, wrestling with the controls. "We're losing stability." Amara's gaze darted to the feed. The structure's glowing patterns were intensifying, sending waves of energy rippling through the water. "It's the structure. It's emitting an electromagnetic pulse." Another jolt threw them sideways, and a sharp crack echoed through the cabin. A hairline fracture snaked across the viewport, and seawater began to seep in. "We need to retreat," Danny yelled, panic in his voice. "No," Amara shouted, her mind racing. "If we leave now, we might lose the signal forever." "Jiro, hold position." Jiro hesitated but nodded, his knuckles white on the controls. "Holding. But make it quick." Amara frantically typed commands into her laptop, sensing it with the sub-scanners. The signal was clearer now, almost like a voice speaking through static. As she worked, the glowing patterns on the structure shifted, forming a grid-like map on the monitor. "It's a map," she whispered. "A map of Earth, and something else." The map displayed Earth surrounded by a series of converging lines that led to a distant point in space. Beneath it was a single line of text in an ancient script. Amara's software struggled to translate it, but one word stood out: Prime. "What does it mean?" Danny asked, his voice trembling. Before Amara could answer, the sub lurched again. From the depths below, a shadow moved, a massive serpentine shape circling the structure. The glow from the glyphs dimmed, as if the structure itself was reacting to the creature's presence. "We've got company," Jiro said grimly, his hands shaking on the controls. The creature turned toward them, its glowing eyes locking onto the sub. It let out a bone-shaking roar that reverberated through the water. "Amara," Danny shouted, "whatever you're doing, do it now." Amara's fingers flew across the keyboard, decrypting the last fragment of the signal. The words on the screen shifted, and her blood ran cold as she read the final message. "The key is the beginning. The predator follows. Pull us up," she screamed. Jiro didn't hesitate. The sub's engines roared to life as they ascended, the creature's roar fading into the depths below. But the message lingered in Amara's mind, haunting her. The key was out there, and so was the predator. The skies over Earth darkened as if the stars themselves had vanished. Massive organic ships hung in orbit, their jagged silhouettes blotting out the sun. The world watched in horror as the alien fleet descended. Their arrival wasn't subtle. It was a declaration of dominance. At the newly established Crisis Command Center in Geneva, chaos reigned. Global leaders argued over protocols, their voices competing with the constant chatter of military analysts and scientists. Dr. Amara Voss sat in the corner, unnoticed amid the shouting, her laptop open and glowing. Her team, Danny Ortega, Jiro Tanaka, and Captain Hayes, stood around her, their faces grim. The screen displayed a live feed from orbit. The alien vessels pulsed with a sickly green bioluminescence, their surfaces writhing as though alive. "They're not here to negotiate," Captain Hayes said, breaking the silence. "This is a predator species. They're hunting us." Amara nodded, her mind racing as she reviewed the translated fragments from the signal. "The Thulax," she muttered. "That's what the signal called them. A species that consumes civilizations, feeding on their resources, knowledge, and even genetic material. They don't just destroy, they assimilate." Danny, pacing nervously, ran a hand through his hair. "And we're just supposed to sit here and wait for them to. What? Harvest us?" "Not if we find the key," Amara said firmly. "It's the only thing that can stop them." Before anyone could respond, the room fell silent. A low, guttural hum filled the air, vibrating through the walls. The lights flickered, and a holographic projection appeared in the center of the room. The figure was humanoid but unsettlingly alien. Its skin shifted like liquid metal, reflecting distorted versions of its surroundings. Its voice was deep and resonant, speaking directly into their minds. "We are the Thulax. Surrender your planet and all its knowledge, and your extinction will be swift. Resist, and your suffering will echo across the stars." The room erupted in panic, but Amara stood frozen, staring at the creature. "They know," she whispered. "Know what?" Jiro asked, his voice taut. "They know we found the key," Amara said, her heart pounding. "That's why they're here now. The signal wasn't just a warning. It was a beacon. And we answered it. The hologram's eyes shifted toward her, as if hearing her thoughts. You have heard the call of the ancients, but the key will not save you. It was forged in defiance and failed. Your kind will fare no better. Amara clenched her fists. Then why are you afraid of it? She shot back. The hologram flickered, its expression unreadable. Fear is irrelevant. We are inevitable. With that, the projection vanished, leaving only silence. Captain Hayes was the first to speak. We need to move. If the key is our only shot, we can't waste another second. Amara nodded, pulling up the decrypted map. The next fragment points to Antarctica, she said. There's something buried beneath the ice, something the Thalax didn't want us to find. Danny looked at her, his usual sarcasm replaced by grim determination. Well, I hope it's good, because we're about to have company. On the live feed, dozens of smaller Thalax ships began to detach from the larger vessels, descending toward Earth's surface. The invasion had begun. Amara closed her laptop and stood. We're running out of time. Let's go. As they hurried to awaiting transport, the weight of the alien threat pressed heavily on Amara's mind. The key might be their only hope, but unlocking its power could unleash consequences no one could predict. Above them, the first Thalax ship pierced Earth's atmosphere, its shadow casting a foreboding darkness over the land. The Predator had arrived, and humanity's fight for survival was about to begin. The howling Antarctic winds battered the transport plane as it touched down on the icy expanse. Amara Voss and her team disembarked into the frozen wasteland, the biting cold clawing through their insulated suits. The map from the signal had led them to one of the most remote regions on Earth, a location buried beneath miles of unbroken ice. This better be worth it, Danny muttered, his breath visible in the frigid air as he hauled a case of equipment. Because I can't feel my toes anymore. Quit complaining, Captain Hayes barked, his military tone sharp. We've got bigger problems than frostbite. Amara ignored them both, her focus on the scanner in her hands. The signal was stronger here, pulsing like a heartbeat. She adjusted the device, and a 3D representation of the ice beneath them appeared on the screen. Buried deep within the frozen layers was a massive, symmetrical structure. There it is, she said, her voice trembling, not from the cold, but from awe. The key. Jiro Tanaka knelt beside her, studying the display. How do we even get to it? That thing's buried under 3 kilometers of solid ice. Good question, Danny said, dropping the equipment case with a thud. Please tell me you have a plan that doesn't involve us digging for weeks. Amara smiled faintly and opened the case, revealing an array of compact drilling charges. We don't have weeks. We got hours at most before the Thalax track us here. These charges are precision designed to melt through the ice without damaging what's below. Captain Hayes nodded approvingly. Efficient. Let's get to work. The team worked quickly, placing the charges in a circular formation as the storm above them intensified. Each charge glowed faintly as it activated, emitting intense heat that began to carve a narrow shaft through the ice. As they worked, Amara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She glanced at the horizon, where the storm clouds seemed unnaturally dark, twisting as though alive. They're coming, she murmured. Danny looked up, his face pale. You mean the Thalax? Amara nodded. The signal's been guiding us, but it's also been guiding them. They want the key just as much as we do, maybe more. The final charge detonated with a low rumble, and the ice beneath them groaned. A sudden rush of warm air shot upward, carrying with it the metallic scent of something ancient and powerful. The team peered down into the newly formed shaft. At the bottom, illuminated by the faint glow of the ice, was a massive door made of a dark, unearthly material. Its surface was inscribed with the same glyphs they had seen on the Pacific structure. Now what? Juro asked, his voice echoing in the shaft. Amara carefully descended, her boots crunching on the ice as she approached the door. The glyphs pulsed faintly, reacting to her presence. She hesitated for a moment, then pressed her hand against the surface. The glyphs flared to life, and a deep rumble shook the ground. The door began to slide open, revealing the cavernous chamber bathed in an otherworldly light. In the center stood a towering monolith, its surface shifting and shimmering like liquid metal. "This is it," Amara whispered. "The key." Before they could approach, the comms in Captain Hayes' helmet crackled. "Incoming," a frantic voice shouted. "Multiple Thalax ships descending on your position." The storm above erupted in a flash of green light as alien ships pierced the clouds. The team barely had time to react before the first beams of energy rained down, melting the ice around them. "Inside, now," Hayes barked, pulling Amara away from the door. The team rushed into the chamber, the massive door's ceiling shut behind them, just as the Thalax descended on the site. Amara turned back to the monolith, her mind racing. The key was within their grasp, but activating it might cost them everything. And with the Thalax closing in, they had no choice but to risk it all. The chamber was eerily silent, save for the hum of energy emanating from the monolith at its center. The walls, crafted from an unknown metallic substance, reflected the shimmering glow of the monolith's surface, casting long, wavering shadows across the cavernous space. Amara stood at its base, her heart pounding as she took in the structure before her. It was beautiful, alien, and terrifying. The others gathered around, their breaths shallow as they looked on in awe. Danny adjusted his helmet, his voice muffled through the comms. "So, what's the plan now, Doc?" Amara's gaze never wavered from the monolith. The glyphs, just like the ones they'd encountered on the Pacific structure and the Antarctic ice, were pulsing in rhythmic patterns. The closer she got, the more she felt the deep resonance of something ancient and powerful vibrating through her bones. She could almost hear it whispering to her, a language long forgotten. "We need to activate it," Amara said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "This is the key. It's the only way to stop the Thalax." Danny shot her a concerned look. "And how exactly are we supposed to do that?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but it's a complex code. This monolith is like a massive keycard. It holds the answer, but we have to unlock it first." The hum from the monolith grew louder, almost deafening. Amara's hand reached toward it instinctively, as if the structure itself was calling to her. Her fingers brushed against its surface, and the glyphs flared to life. For a moment, everything around them seemed to freeze, the air thick with an energy that crackled and hummed. "Amara, get back," Danny shouted, his voice panicked. But it was too late. The monolith shifted, its surface rippling like liquid, and a deep, resonant voice filled the chamber. It was not a sound they could hear with their ears. It was a voice inside their minds, a presence that pressed on their consciousness, speaking in a language older than any human tongue. "You have awoken the key." Amara's knees buckled slightly, but she forced herself to remain standing. The voice was overwhelming, like a flood of memories crashing into her, threatening to drown her in ancient knowledge. She steadied herself and focused. The signal she had decoded before, the fragments of the warning, all began to make sense. This was no ordinary artifact. The Thalax weren't the only predators to fear. "The key is both a weapon and a prison," the voice continued, its tone echoing with an ancient weight. "It is the legacy of those who fought the Thalax, who sealed them away. But its power comes with a cost." Amara's heart raced. "A cost," she whispered. The monolith's light brightened, nearly blinding. "Those who wield the key will carry its burden. The Thalax will seek to reclaim it, and they will not stop until it is theirs." Danny stepped forward, his voice strained. "So, what? We use it and risk, what? Destroying the entire planet." The monolith pulsed again, its energy surging. "Only those who are willing to sacrifice everything may wield the key. The predator's hunger cannot be sated. It will grow until it consumes all." Jiro stepped back, fear flickering across his face. "We can't. We can't just use this thing. There's no way to control it. But Amara's resolve hardened. We don't have a choice. If we don't use it, the Thalax will destroy us all. We need to activate it. Now. She stepped forward again, this time pressing both hands against the monolith. The glyphs on its surface erupted in a violent pulse, and Amara's body was racked with an intense, searing pain. Images flashed before her eyes, visions of entire worlds being consumed by the Thalax, civilizations falling into darkness. It was the cost of wielding the key, but it was also the only way to stop the coming extinction. She gasped for air as the final piece of the code locked into place. The monolith's power surged, and a beam of energy shot from the top, piercing the ceiling of the cavern and cutting through the ice above. "We've activated it," Amara said through gritted teeth. "Now we fight." Outside, the Thalax ships loomed closer, their dark shapes blotting out the sky. The Predator had found them. But now, humanity had a weapon of their own. And with it, the last hope of survival. The beam of light from the monolith pierced the sky, cutting through the ice and rock as if they were nothing more than mist. The Thalax ships, now in low orbit, shifted in unison. Their sensors detected the surge of power that had not been seen in millennia. It was unmistakable. The key had been activated. Inside the monolith's chamber, Amara stood tall, her body trembling from the overwhelming surge of energy coursing through her veins. She could feel it, an ancient power awakening, a force that thrummed with the weight of civilizations long gone. The monolith was alive, and now it was asking her to lead. Danny, eyes wide, staggered to her side. "Amara, what the hell just happened?" She didn't answer immediately, her hand still resting on the surface of the monolith. The air around them crackled with energy, and the ground beneath their feet rumbled as though it was waking up. "We've unleashed something," she said, her voice strained. "Something powerful. The Thalax won't stop until they have it, and if they do, it's over." Jiro, watching the chaos outside the chamber through a nearby viewport, clenched his fists. "We don't have time for this. We need to prepare for what's coming." "They'll be here any minute." Amara nodded, her gaze drifting back to the monolith. She knew what she had to do, but the question still lingered. Was she willing to carry the burden of this power? It was too dangerous, too unpredictable. The Thalax were relentless predators, but if humanity was going to survive, they needed to face this threat head-on. Suddenly, the chamber walls began to shift, opening up to reveal a massive array of weaponized machinery hidden beneath the ice. It was as if the monolith had unlocked an ancient armory, and now it was offering its weapons to them. Massive energy cannons, ships with sleek designs, and armored suits appeared, dormant but ready for activation. "This is it," Amara breathed, her hands still trembling. "This is the last chance we have." Captain Hayes stepped forward, his face a mask of grim determination. "We'll need every weapon we can get. I'll take command of the ground forces. We don't have long before they'd reach this place." Amara turned to him, nodding. "I'll stay with the key. If we can find a way to amplify its power, we can take down their fleet. But I'll need you to buy us time." "Understood," Hayes said, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. He turned to Jiro and Danny. "Get to the transport. You're with me. We're going on the offensive." As the team scrambled to prepare, the outside world became a battlefield. The Thalax ships deployed their ground forces, massive, insectoid creatures, each one bristling with weapons and a hunger for destruction. They landed with horrifying precision, cutting through the ice with ease. The battle for Earth had begun. Inside the chamber, Amara was left alone with the monolith, her mind racing. The beam of light had faded, but the monolith's presence was still overwhelming, urging her forward. The weight of the key's power felt unbearable, but there was no turning back. She activated the control panel, watching as the array of weapons powered up. The energy was building again, feeding off her emotions, her determination. She was connected to it now, bonded with the monolith. As she focused, the ancient power responded. The hum grew louder, more intense, until a bright light burst forth from the monolith's core, flooding the chamber with pure energy. "Now or never," Amara whispered. With a final push, she directed the energy upward, sending a shockwave of power surging through the ice. Above, the Thalax ships faltered as the energy beam tore through their shields, exposing their vulnerable points. Outside, Captain Hayes' team engaged the Thalax forces with a fury born of desperation. The energy weapons, now fully powered by the monolith's power, ripped through the alien forces. For a moment, it seemed that the tide of battle might shift in humanity's favor. But deep in the shadows of the Thalax ships, something stirred. A larger, more ominous craft emerged from the cloud of destruction, its massive form dwarfing the others. It was a predator beyond anything they had seen. An apex, a creature designed to hunt and destroy. Amara stared at the ship through the viewport, dread filling her heart. This wasn't over. The predator had only just begun to hunt. The massive Thalax ship loomed over the battlefield, its sleek, insectoid shape rippling with dark energy. It was unlike any vessel they had faced so far. Its hull was reinforced with unknown alloys, and its engines pulsed with a sickly green light. As it descended, the ground trembled beneath Amara's feet. This was the apex predator, the ultimate force in the Thalax arsenal. Outside, Captain Hayes' team had pushed forward, the monolith-powered weapons cutting through the waves of alien soldiers. Yet the sight of the behemoth ship descending cast a heavy shadow over their progress. The Thalax weren't retreating. They were regrouping for something far worse. Amara gripped the control panel, sweat beading on her forehead. The monolith's energy was still pulsing through her, feeding her determination, but it was fading. She had given everything to turn the tide, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. They needed more. Suddenly, a voice cut through her thoughts, low and resonant, yet filled with an eerie calm. "You have awakened the key, but you have only awakened its wrath." It was the voice from the monolith, but this time it was not just inside her mind. It was speaking to the entire team. The power of the key is not meant to be wielded lightly. It is a force that will burn through all, including you. The Thalax are but the first to feel its fury. The true enemy lies beyond the stars. Amara's breath caught in her throat. She had known the key was a weapon of unimaginable power, but she hadn't realized the full scope of its cost. The Thalax were only the beginning. "We don't have a choice," she whispered to herself, her hands shaking, as she input the final sequence into the monolith's control panel. "We have to finish this." Outside, the Thalax ship fired a volley of energy beams, each one capable of incinerating entire cities in seconds. The explosions echoed through the ice as they carved deep craters into the battlefield. Yet, as the ship's firepower seemed ready to obliterate everything in its path, something changed. The monolith pulsed brighter, its energy converging into a focused beam that shot up into the sky. The first Thalax ship faltered, its shields flickering as the beam tore through its hull. The beam expanded, spreading outward, connecting with every Thalax vessel in orbit. The energy surged through the fleet, overwhelming their technology, ripping their ships apart from the inside. Amara watched in awe as the Thalax fleet began to disintegrate. Their ships crumbled, torn apart by the raw power of the key. But as the energy spread, she felt the cost. Her mind was slipping, the power of the key pulling at her very soul. She was fading, each passing moment draining the last of her strength. "Amara!" Danny's voice rang out over the comms. Frantic. "Amara, stop. You can't keep this up." But it was too late. The key had already done what it was meant to, obliterating the Thalax and sealing their fate. The predator was no more. Yet, Amara knew that this power came at a price. Her vision blurred, her limbs grew heavy. But she didn't let go. She held on. For humanity. For Earth. For the people who had given everything to fight. With a final surge of effort, The beam from the monolith exploded outward in a brilliant flash of light, sending shockwaves across the battlefield and through the alien fleet. The remaining Thalax ships disintegrated, their hulking forms collapsing in on themselves, leaving nothing but voids in their wake. The silence that followed was deafening. Amara collapsed to her knees, gasping for air. Her body was drained, her connection to the monolith fading. But she had done it. She had stopped the Thalax, at the cost of her own strength. The key had done its job, but at a cost they might never truly understand. Danny rushed to her side, pulling her into his arms. "You did it," he whispered. "You saved us all." Amara's eyes fluttered, her vision blurring as she fought to stay conscious. "We survived," she breathed. "But the fight isn't over. The Thalax were just the beginning. There's more out there." As the battle raged on in the distance, and the remains of the Thalax ships slowly fell to the frozen ground, Amara knew one thing for certain. The war for humanity's survival had only just begun.